My parents couldn't find the time to watch me say, I do, but 6 years later, they somehow found the time to ask for $90,000, the second my net worth hit 9 figures. I used to believe that love was a transaction. I thought that if I just paid enough into the family pot with good grades, with obedience, with achievements, I would eventually buy the affection my parents gave away so freely to my younger brother, Tyler. Growing up in Henderson, Nevada, the exchange rate was rigged. If Tyler, with his messy hair and charming grin, brought home a C-, Mom would ruffle his hair and laugh, calling it boys being boys. If I brought home an A-, the air in the kitchen would turn frigid. She wouldn't yell. She would just look at me with that specific disappointment reserved for a bad investment and ask why I was slipping. That dynamic bled into my adulthood like ink in water. So, when my fiancé, Caleb, and I set a date for our wedding in San Diego, I engaged in one last desperate bid for their approval. I didn't just invite them. I curated the entire event around the possibility of their presence. I sent the invitations months in advance, tracking the RSVPs like a hawk. Dad, a man who usually moved through life like a shadow, said he would try. Mom didn't even offer the courtesy of a lie. Her text was brief, brutal, and burned into my memory. We'll see. Depends on Tyler's schedule. Tyler was 24 years old. He wasn't a child, but in my mother's eyes, he was the sun, and the rest of us were just asteroids, hoping not to crash. I held on to hope until the very last second. I was standing in the bridal suite of the Hotel del Coronado, the ocean breeze rattling the window pane. My dress, a silk mermaid gown that contrasted beautifully against my deep brown skin, was half-buttoned. My maid of honor, Jasmine, was fixing my veil when her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, her face falling, and whispered the words that broke the last tether I had to my childhood. Aaron, they're not coming. I didn't cry. I laughed. It bubbled up from my chest. Dry and sharp. It wasn't funny. But the absurdity of 30 years of effort evaporating in a single moment was hysterical. I checked my own phone. My dad had sent a single message at 4:42 p.m., exactly 18 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. Sorry, kiddo. Something came up with Tyler. Something came up. My wedding. The biggest day of my life. And I was an afterthought to an undefined something. That night, Caleb held my hand so tight, I thought he might break my fingers. He was a good man, with pale blue eyes that saw right through my armor. He knew I was hurting, even as I smiled for the photos, but as the music played and the guests danced under the string lights, a cold numbness settled into my chest. It wasn't heartbreak, it was clarity. I realized I had been banging on a locked door for 3 decades, begging to be let in, when I should have just walked away and built my own house. I stopped chasing people who didn't want to be caught. Over the next 6 years, silence became my strategy. While Mom posted Facebook albums from Tyler's beer league softball games, captioning them with more pride than she'd ever shown for my master's degree, I poured everything I had into a business idea that everyone called crazy. Caleb and I leveraged everything. We bought neglected, dusty boutique inns across the West Coast, places with good bones but bad management, and converted them into modern, digital-first sanctuaries. I worked until my eyes blurred. I worked through holidays. I worked through the silence of my phone on birthdays. By year 3, we had 8 properties. By year 5, we had 32. By year 6, we got acquired. The deal was finalized on a rainy Tuesday in Seattle. A hospitality conglomerate bought us out for $850 million. It is a number so large it feels abstract. It's a number that changes the gravitational pull of your life. When the news hit Forbes the next morning, my phone, which had been peaceful for years, suddenly exploded. It vibrated off the nightstand. College friends I hadn't spoken to since graduation were suddenly sliding into my DMs. Ex-coworkers were sending, "Congrats," texts with too many emojis. And then, the name popped up. Dad. I stared at the screen for almost a full minute, the white letters blurring against the black background. Saw the news. Proud of you. Let's talk. My stomach dropped. It wasn't excitement. It was the familiar phantom ache of being wanted only when I had something to offer. I didn't respond. I put the phone face down and looked out the window at the Seattle skyline, trying to regulate my breathing. 3 hours later, the phone rang. It was Mom. I hadn't heard her voice in 4 years. I hesitated. my thumb hovering over the red button. But curiosity, or maybe the lingering ghost of the daughter who just wanted to be good enough, made me swipe green. "I heard the sale went through," she said. "No, hello. No, how are you? Just straight to the inventory." "Hello to you too, Mom," I said, my voice steady, hardened by 6 years of boardroom negotiations. "Listen, Erin," she rushed on, her tone breathless in a way that usually meant she was planning something. "It's serendipitous, really. Your brother, Tyler, he's in a bit of a bind. He found this house, a lovely place, but the bank is being difficult about the down payment. He just needs $90,000. And since you're doing so well since you just made all that money, I figured it wouldn't be a problem for you to wire it over. We can call it a loan if that makes you feel better." A loan. She skipped my wedding for him. She ignored my success for him. And now, the first time she speaks to me in years, it's to harvest the fruits of my labor to feed him. I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I felt a strange, icy calm wash over me. "I figured," she continued, filling the silence, "that you'd want to help family." "I do help family," I said, looking over at Caleb, who was watching me with concern from the doorway. "That's why I'm hanging up." I ended the call before she could finish her gasp. For the first time, I felt nothing. No guilt. No fear. No sense of obligation. I was free. Or so I thought. Because 10 minutes later, a text from my father arrived that would shatter the reality I thought I understood. "There's something you don't know about why we skipped your wedding. Please just hear me out." I stared at the screen. I nearly deleted it. But the wording, it felt too intentional. It felt like a loose thread on a sweater that, if pulled, would unravel the entire history of my life. Have you ever had a family member who only showed up when you had something to give? It's a pain that never really goes away, isn't it? If you've ever felt like the black sheep who became the golden goose, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment, "I know my worth," down below with the city you're watching from. Let's show them we don't need their validation to shine. I stared at the phone until the screen went dark, my reflection staring back at me in the black glass. The text message from my father hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. It was a bait, clearly. It had to be. For 6 years, silence had been their preferred language, broken only by the occasional generic holiday greeting that felt more like a calendar notification than an act of love. And now, suddenly, there was a secret? Now? When my name was in the headlines and my bank account had swelled to a size they couldn't comprehend, there was suddenly nuance to their abandonment. "Erin?" Caleb's voice was soft, grounding. He was standing by the kitchen island, a glass of wine in his hand. He had watched me hang up on my mother with a look of fierce pride. But now, seeing my face crumble into confusion, his protective instincts were flaring. I turned the phone around and showed him the message. "There's something you don't know about why we skipped your wedding. Please just hear me out." Caleb read it, his jaw tightening. He set his wineglass down with a sharp clink against the marble counter. "You don't have to answer that," he said, walking over to wrap his arms around my waist. "You know that, right? You don't owe him a hearing. They made their choice. We lived the consequences. We built this life without them." "I know," I whispered, leaning back into his chest. I could feel the steady thrum of his heart, a rhythm that had been my only constant for the last decade. "But Caleb." Something came up with Tyler. That's what he said that day. "What if," I trailed off, the old, pathetic hope clawing its way up my throat. "What if it wasn't just indifference? What if something actually happened?" "It's a hook, Erin," Caleb warned gently, kissing the top of my head. "He's reeling you in because your mom failed to get the money." He was probably right. Caleb was almost always right about people. It was how we had identified the potential in those dilapidated inns before anyone else saw their value. But the wording of the text felt different. It didn't feel like my mother's chaotic, demanding energy. It felt desperate. It felt quiet. "I have to know," I said, pulling away from him. "If I don't call, I'll wonder for the rest of my life. I need to close the loop." Caleb sighed, a sound of resignation, but he nodded. "Put it on speaker. I'm not leaving this room." I took a breath that rattled in my lungs and tapped the call icon. It rang once, twice, then, a click. "Erin?" My father's voice sounded older than I remembered. Thinner. It lacked the booming authority he used to have when he was teaching Tyler how to hold a baseball bat, and it lacked the dismissive edge he used to have when I asked him to review my homework. He sounded tired. "I'm here," Dad, I said, my voice betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I was the CEO of an $850 million company. I could handle a phone call with a retired mechanic from Henderson. You said there's something I don't know. You have 2 minutes. I saw the news, he stammered. About the sale. I really am proud, kiddo. I always knew you were sharp. You didn't text me to talk about my business acumen, I cut in, my hand gripping the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned pale. You texted me about my wedding. The one you skipped 6 years ago. The one you missed because something came up with Tyler. There was a heavy silence on the other end. I could hear the faint hum of the ceiling fan in the background, a sound I remembered from my childhood living room. It transported me back instantly to that beige carpet, the smell of potpourri and stale cigarette smoke, and the feeling of being invisible in my own home. It wasn't Tyler, Dad said softly. The world stopped spinning for a fraction of a second. What? Something didn't come up with Tyler, he repeated, his voice gaining a tremor. That was the line your mother told me to use. She said it would be easier for you to hear. Easier? I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. Easier to hear that my brother's schedule was more important than my marriage vows? Dad, stop lying. If you want money, just ask for it like Mom did. Don't rewrite history. I'm not asking for money, he shouted, the sudden volume making me flinch. I don't want a dime, Aaron. I can't do this anymore. Not now that I see how well you're doing, how far you've gone without us. It's eating me alive. Then tell me, I demanded. Why weren't you there? He took a jagged breath. Your mother. She told me you didn't want us there. My chest turned to ice. The blood drained from my face so quickly that Caleb reached out to steady me. What are you talking about? A few weeks before the wedding, Dad said, the words tumbling out now. Mom showed me an email. She said it was from you. She said you were stressed, that the planning was too much, and that you thought our presence would cause drama. She said you asked us to stay home, to let you have your day in peace. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I wanted to go, Aaron, he continued, his voice breaking. God. I had my suit pressed. I had the tickets in my card online. But she sat me down and said, if you go, you're disrespecting her wishes. She wants to start her new life without our baggage. I believed her. I didn't want to be the reason you were unhappy on your wedding day, so I stayed home. I sent that text because she said it was better to make it about Tyler than to admit you had uninvited us. The room spun. The high ceilings of my penthouse. The rain streaking the windows of the Seattle skyline, it all blurred into a kaleidoscope of gray. I never sent an email, I whispered, the horror rising in my throat like bile. Dad. I sent you an invitation. I saved you a seat in the front row. I waited for you. She showed it to me, he insisted, sounding like a man drowning. It was from your email address. It had your signature. It said, please don't come. We want a small, drama-free event. I never sent it, I said again, louder this time, the realization crashing into me with the force of a freight train. All these years. All the therapy sessions where I cried about how I wasn't enough for them. All the nights I lay awake wondering what was so wrong with me that my own father couldn't be bothered to watch me get married. It wasn't apathy. It wasn't laziness. It was sabotage. She lied to you, I said, my voice shaking with a rage I hadn't felt in years. She didn't just skip the wedding, Dad. She stole my father from me. He sounded broken. I didn't know, Aaron. I swear to God. I didn't know until today. When Mom called you for the money, and you hung up, she started ranting. She let something slip about how she saved you from us years ago. And I got this sick feeling. I closed my eyes, tears hot and fast tracking down my cheeks. Caleb pulled me into his arms, holding me up as my knees gave way. I need proof, I choked out. If she showed you an email, find it. Because if this is true, if this is really true, I'll find it, Dad promised. I'll find it right now. The line went dead. I stood there in the silence, the echo of his confession bouncing around the room, realizing that the villain in my story wasn't indifference. It was active, malicious intent, and she had been sleeping in the same bed as my father for 40 years. The silence that followed the end of the call was heavier than the one that had preceded it. Before, the silence was born of estrangement, a dull, familiar ache that I had learned to live with, like a bad knee or a scar that twinges in the rain. But this silence? This was the silence of a bomb having gone off. where the dust is still settling and you aren't quite sure which parts of the building are still standing. Caleb didn't ask me if I was okay. He knew better. He just guided me to the oversized velvet armchair by the window, the one that looked out over the Space Needle, and sat on the ottoman in front of me, his hands encompassing mine. "He's looking for it," I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. "He said he's going to dig through his old AOL account." "If she did this, Aaron," Caleb said, a dangerous edge to his usually calm voice. "If she actually fabricated a message from you to keep him away. That's not just mean. That's pathological." I nodded, staring at the rain streaking the glass. "It explains so much though, doesn't it? Why he never called. Why he looked so guilty in the few photos I saw of him during that time. I thought he was ashamed of me. I thought he was ashamed that I wasn't the daughter he wanted." I choked on a sob. "He thought he was giving me space. He thought he was being a good father by staying away." I didn't sleep for 2 nights. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the timeline of my life rearranging itself. I replayed every interaction, every dismissed accomplishment, every moment where Dad seemed distant. Was he distant because he didn't care? Or was he distant because Mom was whispering poison in his ear, curating a version of me that was cold, aloof, and ungrateful? I paced the length of our penthouse. I answered emails from my acquisition team at 3 a.m., my mind razor-sharp and terrifyingly alert. I reorganized the pantry. I scrubbed the kitchen counters until they gleamed. Caleb slept in shifts, waking up every few hours to find me staring at my phone, waiting for the evidence that would either vindicate my father or prove he was a liar covering his tracks. Then, on the morning of the 3rd day, just as the sun was breaking over the Cascades, the email arrived. Subject: I found it. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. Caleb, sensing the shift in the air, was at my side in an instant, looking over my shoulder. It was a forward. Buried deep in an archive folder named Family, Dad had found the exchange from 6 years ago. From Janice Mom's email to Robert, Dad's email, date, the 12th of June 2019, 10:14 a.m. Subject: Wedding update. Bob. I didn't want to show you this, but you keep asking about booking the flights. She sent this to me this morning. I think we need to respect her wishes. It breaks my heart, but she's clearly overwhelmed. Below Mom's message was a forwarded block of text. It looked like an email from me. It had my old email address at the top. It had my old signature block. But the body of the text: Mom, tell Dad not to come. I can't handle the pressure of having you guys there. It's too much drama with Tyler's situation, and I just want a small, drama-free event. Please, just let me do this on my own. I'll send photos. I stared at the words. Drama-free event. That's not you, Caleb said immediately. You don't talk like that. No, I whispered, zooming in on the text. I don't. But look closer. I pointed to the phrasing. It's too much drama with Tyler's situation. I never called it Tyler's situation, I said, the realization hardening into cold fury. I called it Tyler's mess, or Tyler's crap, or Tyler getting arrested again. I never, ever used passive language like situation to describe my brother's chaos. But Mom did. Mom always softened his edges. She always made his failures sound like unfortunate weather patterns that just happened to him. And there was something else. A small, technical glitch that my mother, a woman who still typed with 2 fingers, wouldn't have noticed. But I, a tech CEO, spotted instantly. The header, in a real email chain. The from field in a forward includes the timestamp down to the second, and the time zone. The text in Mom's email just said, 10:14 a.m. No time zone, no seconds. It wasn't a forwarded email. It was typed out. She had manually typed the header information to look like a forward, then typed the fake message below it. She had forged a digital letter from her own daughter to stop her husband from attending his child's wedding. She blocked him. I realized aloud. She probably intercepted the physical invitation from the mailbox. She's always the one who gets the mail, and when Dad asked why we hadn't sent one, she probably said I was going digital. Then she cooked this up. I felt sick, physically, violently ill. But then, the sickness passed, replaced by a clarity so sharp it felt like a weapon. Dad sent a follow-up text a moment later. I'm so sorry, Aaron. I didn't know. I should have called you. I should have asked you myself. I was a coward, and I let her control the narrative because it was easier than fighting her. But I want to fix it. Can I come to Seattle? I'll fly out tonight. I want to see you. I looked at Caleb. He nodded, his eyes fierce. Whatever you want to do. I picked up the phone and typed back. No. Don't come to Seattle. I watched the 3 dots of his typing bubble appear, then disappear. He was probably panicking, thinking I was cutting him off forever. I typed again. I want to meet. But not here. I want to meet in Henderson. At the house. If we were going to do this, we weren't going to do it in the safety of my new life, in the sanctuary I had built far away from their toxicity. No. We were going to the scene of the crime. I wanted to stand in the living room where she typed that email. I wanted to look her in the eye, in the house where she favored Tyler, where she minimized me, where she carefully, methodically, dismantled the bond between a father and his daughter. Dad replied instantly. Okay. When? Tomorrow, I typed. And Dad? Don't tell Mom I'm coming. I set the phone down. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Not with fear, but with the adrenaline of a hunt. The sad, rejected daughter who cried on her wedding night was gone. The woman who was boarding that plane was the CEO who had just negotiated an $850 million deal. I knew how to handle a hostile takeover, and I was coming for the truth. The flight from Seattle to Las Vegas takes roughly 2.5 hours. But for me, it felt like traveling through a wormhole back into a past I had spent a fortune trying to escape. We didn't fly commercial. I chartered a Gulfstream, a petty but necessary indulgence. I needed the armor of my success wrapped tight around me. I needed to land in Nevada not as Erin the disappointment, but as Erin the multimillionaire who could buy her parents' entire neighborhood without checking her bank balance. Caleb sat across from me. His laptop open but his eyes fixed on my face. He hadn't tried to talk me out of this. Not once. He understood that some wounds can't be stitched up. They have to be cauterized. You ready? He asked as the pilot announced our descent. Below us, the neon grid of the strip was just starting to flicker against the twilight. A valley of artificial light surrounded by unforgiving darkness. No, I admitted, smoothing the fabric of my trousers. I was dressed for war. A tailored blazer, sharp heels, and a diamond tennis bracelet that caught the cabin lights. But I'm doing it anyway. We rented a black SUV at the private terminal. I drove. I needed to feel the wheel in my hands, to control the speed at which we approached the blast zone. The drive to Henderson was a surreal blur of strip malls, dry cleaners, and fast food chains that hadn't changed since I was 16. It was the landscape of my mediocrity, the backdrop to 1,000 memories of being told I wasn't trying hard enough. When I turned onto Elm Street, my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The house number 402 looked smaller than I remembered. The beige stucco was stained near the gutters, and the lawn was a patch of dying yellow grass that had clearly surrendered to the desert heat. It looked tired. It looked insignificant. But the dreaded inspired was monumental. Dad's truck was in the driveway. He knew we were coming. Mom, presumably, was inside, oblivious, probably watching her evening soaps or scrolling through Facebook to see what Tyler's ex-girlfriend was up to. Park down the street, Caleb suggested softly. Let's walk up. Don't give them a warning. I nodded and pulled the car to the curb 3 houses down. The air outside was dry and still, smelling of dust and oleander. I took Caleb's hand, his grip firm and warm, anchoring me to the present. Remember, he whispered as we approached the walkway. You hold the cards, all of them. I didn't knock. I still had a key on my old keychain, a relic I had never thrown away. Perhaps out of some subconscious desire to one day return and fix things. My hand trembled as I slid the brass key into the lock. It stuck for a moment, it always did, before turning with a heavy thunk. The door swung open. The smell hit me first. It was a visceral assault. Stale cigarette smoke, lemon pledge, and something savory cooking in the oven, likely meatloaf. It was the scent of my childhood, and it made my stomach turn. We stepped into the entryway. The television was blaring in the living room. I could hear the canned laughter of a sitcom. Bob? Is that you? Mom's voice drifted from the kitchen. Did you get the milk? Tyler's coming over later. He wants cereal. I walked past the living room, my heels clicking sharply on the cheap laminate flooring. Dad was sitting in his recliner, the one with the duct tape on the armrest. He looked up as I entered. His face was gray, his eyes rimmed with red. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. When he saw me, he started to rise, his mouth opening to speak. But I held up a hand to silence him. I kept walking, straight into the kitchen. Mom was at the counter, her back to me, chopping carrots. She was wearing floral leggings and an oversized t-shirt that said Mama Bear. Bob, I swear, if you forgot the milk again, you're going back out, she said, not turning around. The knife chopped rhythmically against the wood. Thwack, thwack, thwack. He didn't forget the milk, I said. The chopping stopped. Mom froze. For a second, the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Then, she turned around slowly, the knife still in her hand. Her eyes widened. Her mouth dropped open, then snapped shut. She looked from me to Caleb, who was standing like a sentinel in the doorway. And then down at my clothes, assessing the cost of the blazer, the shoes, the jewelry. I saw the calculation happen in real time. The shock was instantly replaced by a veneer of sugary delight, a mask she had perfected over decades. Erin. She dropped the knife and wiped her hands on a dish towel, rushing forward with her arms outstretched. Oh my God, you're here. Bob. Did you know she was coming? Why didn't anyone tell me? She tried to hug me. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just stood there, stiff as a board, until she realized I wasn't going to reciprocate. She pulled back, her smile faltering just a fraction. Well, she huffed, a nervous laugh escaping her. This is a surprise. A wonderful surprise. We were just talking about you. Weren't we, Bob? She yelled toward the living room. I was just telling your father how proud we are of the sale. 850 million. Can you imagine? My little girl, a tycoon. She reached out to touch my arm, her fingers grazing the fabric of my sleeve. And you look expensive. Doesn't she look expensive, Bob? Dad shuffled into the kitchen then. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. His expression a mixture of shame and terror. He stood by the refrigerator, looking like a prisoner in his own home. It's good to see you, Erin, Dad said, his voice barely a whisper. Is it? I asked, my voice cool and even. I looked back at Mom. She was beaming, practically vibrating with the proximity to wealth. She wasn't seeing her daughter. She was seeing a walking ATM who could solve all of Tyler's problems. Of course it is, Mom chirped. I know we haven't spoken much, but families go through phases. And now that you're here, we can celebrate. I can make up the guest room. Tyler will be so excited to see you. You know, about that loan. Sit down, Mom, I said. It wasn't a request. It was a command, delivered with the same tone I used to fire incompetent executives. She blinked, taken aback. Excuse me? I said. Sit down. I pulled a chair out from the kitchen table, the scratched pine table, where I used to do my homework while she criticized my handwriting and pointed at it. Mom's smile vanished. Her eyes darted to Dad, looking for backup, but he was staring at the floor. She looked back at me, sensing the shift in atmospheric pressure. The mask slipped, revealing the annoyance underneath. You don't get to come into my house and order me around, Erin, she snapped, the sweetness curdling instantly. I don't care how much money you have. And I don't care about your house, I countered, stepping closer to her. I care about my wedding. The color drained from her face. It was subtle, but I saw it. A flicker of genuine fear behind the defiance. Your wedding? She scoffed, crossing her arms. That was years ago. Why are you bringing up old news? We told you. Something came up with Tyler. We apologized. Get over it. Something came up with Tyler, I repeated slowly. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a printout of the email Dad had forwarded me. The fake email. The forgery. I slammed it onto the table. The sound cracked like a whip. Dad showed me the email, Mom. The one I supposedly sent. Mom looked at the paper, then at Dad. Her eyes narrowed into slits. Bob, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. What did you do? I told her the truth, Janice, Dad said, his voice gaining a fraction of strength. I told her I wanted to go. You idiot, she muttered. She looked back at me, her chin raised in defiance. She didn't deny it. She didn't apologize. She just doubled down. Fine. So I sent an email. I did it for your father. He has a bad heart, Erin. He couldn't handle the travel. I was protecting him. And frankly, I was protecting you. You were a mess back then. You didn't need us there judging you. Protecting me? I laughed. A harsh, jagged sound. You blocked Dad from seeing my invitation. You forged a message saying I didn't want him there. You didn't do that to protect anyone. You did it to hurt me. I did it because you were making a mistake, she shouted, finally dropping the pretense. Marrying that man, she gestured vaguely at Caleb. You were rushing into it. You were trying to prove you didn't need us. I thought if we didn't go, you'd call it off. I thought you'd come home. You thought I'd come home to this? I gestured around the kitchen. To be Tyler's second fiddle forever. It's not about Tyler, she screamed. God, you are so obsessed with him. You always have been. Tyler gets this. Tyler gets that. You were the strong one, Aaron. You didn't need coddling. Tyler needed us. You didn't. I needed my parents at my wedding, I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. I needed my father to walk me down the aisle. Well, you didn't get it, she spat. And look at you. You're rich. You're successful. So clearly, I made the right call. My tough love made you who you are. I stared at her. She truly believed it. She had twisted her neglect into a virtue, her cruelty into a coaching strategy. I'm not here for an apology, I said quietly. I know I'll never get one. I'm here because Dad said there's something else. Something I don't know. I turned to Dad. He was weeping now, silent tears tracking through the stubble on his cheeks. Tell her, Bob, Mom warned, her voice dropping to a dangerous growl. You keep your mouth shut. No, Dad said. He looked up, and for the first time in my life, I saw him look at her with pure loathing. I'm done, Janice. She has the money. She has the power. She doesn't need us. But she deserves the truth. He looked at me. It wasn't just that she didn't want us at the wedding, Aaron. It's why. Bob! Mom lunged for him, but Caleb stepped in, blocking her path with his broad frame. She bounced off him, seething. Why? I asked, stepping closer to my father. Dad took a deep breath. Because if we went, if we were in the photos, people might have noticed. Noticed what? That you don't look like us. I frowned. What? Of course I look like you. I have your nose. I have Mom's. I trailed off. Actually, I didn't have Mom's anything. I had always assumed I took after a grandparent I never met. You're not adopted if that's what you're thinking, Dad said quickly. But, Aaron, look at your mother. Look at me. I looked. Dad? Pale, blue-eyed, thinning hair. Mom, fair-skinned, soft features. And me. Deep brown skin, dark, coiled hair, dark eyes. I had grown up in a time and place where people didn't ask questions, and my parents had always shut down any conversation about our heritage. We're just a mix, Mom would say. Genius are funny. Mom didn't want to go to the wedding, Dad said, his voice shaking. Because she knew your biological father's family lives in San Diego, and she was terrified that if they saw the wedding announcement in the local paper, or if they saw you. The room went dead silent. My biological father? I whispered. You said you were my father. I am your father, Dad sobbed. I raised you. But biologically, Janice had an affair. 31 years ago. I turned to Mom. She was leaning against the counter, her face a mask of stone. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the wall. Who? I demanded. Mom didn't answer. Who was it? I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. Mom turned to me, her eyes cold and hard. Does the name Marcus Blackwood mean anything to you? My knees buckled. Caleb caught me. Marcus Blackwood. The owner of the hotel chain that had just acquired my company. The man who had signed the check for $850 million. My boss. The name hung in the kitchen air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Marcus Blackwood. It wasn't just a name. It was an institution. It was the gold standard of the hospitality industry. It was the signature on the acquisition documents that had been sitting on my desk in Seattle for the last 3 weeks. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep from sliding to the floor. My mind flashed back to the Zoom calls during the due diligence phase. I remembered the way Marcus Blackwood sat in his boardroom chair, a man of imposing stature, with deep, thoughtful eyes and a jawline that could cut glass. I remembered thinking he looked familiar, but I had chalked it up to seeing his face on the cover of Businessweek a dozen times. I realized now, with a sick, vertiginous lurch, that I wasn't recognizing a celebrity. I was recognizing my own reflection. Marcus Blackwood. I repeated, the syllables tasting like ash. The CEO of Blackwood Holdings. The man who just bought my company. Ah, he bought it? Mom asked, her eyes widening. The malice in her expression was momentarily replaced by genuine shock. We knew he was in the industry, obviously. That's why I was so terrified when you went into hotels. I thought it was some kind of cosmic joke. But he bought you? He didn't buy me, I snapped, though the confidence in my voice was fracturing. He bought my business, my assets. Does he know? Caleb asked, his voice low and dangerous. He was looking at Mom with a level of disgust I had never seen him direct at another human being. I don't know, Mom said, crossing her arms defensively. She looked small suddenly, stripped of her matriarchal power. It was 31 years ago, Aaron. I was working at the Mirage as a cocktail waitress. He was a junior executive in town for a conference. It was a weekend. That's all. She looked at Dad, who was staring at his hands, twisting his wedding ring. Bob knew, she said, her voice hardening again. We were on a break. We had a fight. I met Marcus. He was charming. He was rich. He was everything Bob wasn't. But he left. He went back to San Diego or New York or wherever the hell he lives. And then I found out I was pregnant. And you didn't tell him, I said. It wasn't a question. Why would I? Mom scoffed. He was a Blackwood. His family is practically royalty. You think they would have welcomed a cocktail waitress and a baby? They would have crushed me. They would have taken you away. So I went back to Bob. And Bob. She looked at my father with a mix of pity and resentment. Bob took us back. Because he's a saint. Or a fool. Ah, I loved you, Janice, Dad whispered. The tragedy in his voice was suffocating. I loved you, and I loved the baby because she was yours. But she wasn't ours, Mom spat back. And every time I looked at her, every time I saw that dark skin, that hair, it was a reminder of what I did. It was a billboard in my own living room advertising my infidelity. The truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It wasn't that I didn't get good enough grades. It wasn't that Tyler was smarter, or funnier, or better. It was that my very existence was a source of shame. I was a living, breathing scarlet letter. That's why you favored Tyler, I said. The tears finally spilling over. Because he was Bob's. He was the clean child. The proof that you were a normal family. And I was just the mistake. You were difficult, Mom insisted, refusing to concede the moral high ground. You were always so intense. So demanding. Just like him, probably. And when you announced the wedding in San Diego, in his city, I panicked. I thought if we went, someone would see. The Blackwoods own half that city. I thought he might be there. I thought he might see you and put the pieces together. So you destroyed my wedding to hide your secret, I said. You let me believe my father didn't love me, just to protect yourself. I protected this family, she shrieked. If Bob had found out. I knew, Dad interrupted loudly. I always knew, Janice. You think I'm blind? I knew she wasn't mine the day she was born. But I signed the birth certificate. I raised her. She is my daughter. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. Aaron, I wanted to tell you. 1,000 times. But I was scared. I was scared you'd go looking for him. I was scared you'd leave us for a billionaire father who could give you the world, and I'd be left with nothing. I looked at the two of them. A coward and a narcissist, bound together by a lie that had suffocated my entire life. You're right about one thing, Dad, I said, my voice trembling. I could have had the world. But not because of his money. Because I wouldn't have spent 30 years thinking I was worthless. I turned to Caleb. Get the car. Aaron, wait, Dad pleaded, stepping forward. Please, now that it's out, we can fix this. The money, the acquisition. Maybe this is a good thing? If he knows? Maybe that's why he paid so much? I froze. The thought had been scratching at the back of my mind, but hearing Dad say it out loud made it real. Maybe that's why he paid so much. The valuation of my company had been high. Aggressively high. My advisors had been stunned when Blackwood Holdings offered $850 million. We were projected to be worth maybe $600 million in a generous market. I had patted myself on the back. I had thought it was my genius, my branding, my blood, sweat, and tears. But what if it wasn't? What if it was hush money? Or guilt money? Or an inheritance paid out early? If Marcus Blackwood knew who I was, Then my entire career, my greatest achievement, was a lie. I wasn't a self-made CEO. I was just a charity case with a rich biological daddy. The room started to spin. I felt like I was going to throw up. "Do not," I said, pointing a shaking finger at Mom, "ever contact me again. Do not call me. Do not text me. And if you ask for a single dime for Tyler, I will sue you for the emotional distress you've caused me over the last 3 decades. I have the lawyers to do it. And unlike you, I have the money." I grabbed my purse. "Goodbye, Bob." "Erin," he choked out. "Don't," I said. "You chose her. You chose her every single day for 30 years. You don't get to choose me now." We walked out of the house. The desert air was cooling, but my skin felt hot, feverish. We got into the rental car, and Caleb peeled away from the curb, leaving the house on Elm Street shrinking in the rearview mirror. I didn't look back. "Airport?" Caleb asked, his hand finding my knee. "No," I said, staring out the window at the dark highway. My mind was racing, connecting dots I hadn't even known existed. The timeline of the acquisition, the peculiar interest Marcus had taken in the deal personally, the way he had looked at me during the final signing ceremony, not with the shark-like gaze of a corporate raider, but with something softer, something inquisitive. Where then? I pulled out my phone. I opened the Contacts app. I scrolled past Mom and Dad contacts I would be deleting shortly, and found the number I had saved only for emergency business protocols. Marcus Blackwood, personal. He had given it to me after the deal closed. "In case of transition issues," he had said. This was a transition issue. "Take us to the private terminal," I told Caleb, my voice hardening into steel. "But change the flight plan." "We're not going back to Seattle?" "No," I said, clutching the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "We're going to San Diego." "You're going to confront him?" Caleb asked, glancing at me with worry. "Erin, it's 9 p.m. You just found out. Maybe sleep on it?" "I'm done sleeping," I said. "I'm done waiting. I'm done wondering why I wasn't enough." I looked at the phone screen. "I need to know if I earned that $850 million, I whispered. "Or if it was just an allowance." "And if he knew?" Caleb asked. "If he knew all along?" "Then I have a new set of questions," I said, a cold resolve settling over me. Like why he let me grow up in that house believing I was unwanted, while he was sitting on a throne. I hit dial. It rang. Once. Twice. "Erin?" Marcus Blackwood's voice filled the car speakers. It was deep, commanding, and confusingly warm. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. Is everything all right with the transition? We need to talk," I said. "Tonight." There was a pause, a heavy, loaded silence that told me more than words ever could. "I'm at the Coronado estate," he said simply. "I'll leave the gate open." He knew. He definitely knew. And I was about to find out exactly how long he had been watching me. The flight to San Diego was a blur of dark ocean beneath us and the hum of the pressurized cabin. I sat in the leather seat of the Gulfstream, staring at the reflection of a woman I no longer recognized. For 30 years, I had been Erin, the striving, disappointing daughter of Bob and Janice from Henderson. I had built my identity around the scar tissue of their neglect. I had fueled my ambition with the desperate need to prove that I was worth something, even if they didn't think so. Now, at 31, I was suspended at 30,000 feet, realizing that the fuel source of my entire life had been a lie. I wasn't neglected because I was inadequate. I was neglected because I was a reminder. I was a mirror they didn't want to look into. "We're landing," Caleb said, his hand covering mine. His touch was the only real thing in a world that had suddenly turned into a hall of mirrors. "Are you sure you want to go straight there? We can get a hotel. Decompress." "I can't decompress," I said, my voice sounding brittle. "I'm vibrating, Caleb. If I stop moving, I think I'll shatter." We landed at a private airfield just outside the city. A car was waiting, not a rental this time, but a sleek, black sedan sent by Marcus. He hadn't just left the gate open. He had orchestrated our arrival. It was a power move, efficient and seamless. It was exactly the kind of thing I would have done. The realization made me nauseous. The drive to Coronado took us across the bridge that curved over the bay. To my left, the dark silhouette of the Hotel del Coronado rose against the night sky, the very place where I had stood in my wedding dress 6 years ago, reading a text message that broke my heart. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My mother had prevented my father from coming to this island, to hide me from the man who lived just a few miles down the road. The Blackwood estate was not a house. It was a fortress of solitude and wealth. High stone walls covered in creeping ivy blocked it from the street. As we approached, the heavy iron gates swung open silently, granting us access to a winding driveway lined with ancient palms. At the end of it sat a sprawling Spanish Revival mansion, bathed in warm, amber light. It was beautiful. It was intimidating. It was the kind of home people like Janice and Bob only saw in magazines. The car stopped. The driver opened my door. I stepped out into the cool, salt-tinged air, my heels crunching on the gravel. The front door of the mansion opened before I could even reach the steps. Marcus Blackwood stood in the doorway. He was wearing a charcoal cashmere sweater and dark jeans, looking less like a titan of industry and more like a man waiting for a storm to make landfall. Up close, without the barrier of a Zoom screen or a boardroom table, the resemblance was undeniable. It wasn't just the skin tone. It was the arch of the eyebrows, the set of the jaw, the way he stood. Posture perfect. Shoulders back, radiating a quiet, kinetic intensity. I was looking at the male version of myself. "Aaron," he said. His voice was deep, resonating in the quiet courtyard. He didn't smile. He looked apprehensive. "Mr. Blackwood," I replied, keeping the formality like a shield. "Please," he said, stepping aside and gesturing into the foyer. "Come in. Both of you." We walked into a foyer that was larger than the entire ground floor of the house in Henderson. The floors were checkered marble. The art on the walls was original. But I didn't care about the decor. I marched straight through to the library he indicated, a room lined with floor-to-ceiling books and smelling of cedar and old paper. I turned to face him, my heart hammering so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. "Did you know?" I asked. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I needed to know if my life was a lie or a tragedy. "When you signed that deal, when you wired the money, did you know I was your daughter?" Marcus walked over to a heavy oak desk and leaned against it, crossing his ankles. He looked at me for a long moment, his dark eyes searching my face. "I suspected," he said. "Suspected?" I felt the anger flare. Hot and bright. "So the acquisition? The $850 million? It was what? A paternity test? A guilt payment?" "No," he said sharply. The authority in his voice snapped the air like a whip. "Stop right there, Aaron. I don't do charity. And I certainly don't throw almost $1 billion at a hunch." He pushed off the desk and walked toward me, stopping just outside my personal space. "I bought your company because it was the most disruptive, innovative hospitality model I have seen in 20 years. I bought it because you took distressed assets that nobody wanted and turned them into gold mines. I bought it because you are a killer in the boardroom, and I wanted that talent under the Blackwood banner." I held his gaze, desperate to believe him, terrified that he was lying. "I didn't know who you were when my team first brought me the file," he continued. "I just saw the numbers. The numbers were perfect. But then, we had our first video conference." He smiled faintly. A sad, wistful expression. "You turned your camera on. And for a second, I thought I was looking at a ghost. You don't look like Janice. You look like my mother. My mother passed away 10 years ago. But you have her eyes. You have her fire." He turned away, walking to the window that looked out over the dark Pacific. After that call, I did some digging. Not corporate due diligence. Personal. I saw that you were from Henderson. I saw your mother's name was Janice. I remembered Janice. She was unforgettable, in her own way. We had a brief, intense weekend in Vegas 31 years ago. I never heard from her again. "She said she didn't tell you," I said, my voice softening. "She said she was afraid your family would destroy her." Marcus sighed. "My family was difficult. She wasn't entirely wrong to be afraid. But she was wrong to keep you from me." He turned back to face me. "I hired a private investigator 2 weeks ago. He pulled your birth records. He obtained a DNA sample from a coffee cup you left at the negotiation in Seattle. It was illegal, unethical, and necessary." "You stole my DNA?" Caleb interjected, stepping forward protectively. "I confirmed my lineage," Marcus corrected, his eyes locking onto Caleb. "And the results came back 3 days before the deal closed." "So you knew," I whispered. "When we signed, you knew." "I knew," he affirmed. "But Aaron, listen to me. The valuation was set before I knew. The deal was structured before the results came back. You earned that money. You earned every single cent. If anything, Finding out you were my daughter made me hesitate. Why? I asked. Because I knew that if I signed it, you would eventually find out, and you would doubt yourself. You would think exactly what you're thinking right now, that you're a fraud, that you're a nepotism hire. He shook his head. You are not. You built that company despite being raised by people who didn't understand you. You built it in a vacuum of support. That makes you more impressive than I ever was. Tears pricked my eyes. It was the first time, the absolute first time in my life that a parent had looked at me and seen me. Not a burden. Not a mistake. But a force of nature. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice trembling. Why did you wait for me to figure it out? I was going to tell you, Marcus said. I invited you here next week for the post-acquisition strategy retreat, remember? I wanted to do it in person. I wanted to build a relationship with you as a peer first, so you'd know I respected you. I didn't want to blow up your life over a text message. He gestured to the phone in my hand. But it seems Janice beat me to the punch. What happened, Aaron? Why tonight? I asked for money, I said. A bitter laugh escaping me. Or rather, she did. She asked for $90,000 for Tyler. And when I said no, everything unraveled. Marcus's face darkened at the mention of the money. Tyler! The brother! The golden child, I corrected. And Janice? Marcus asked. How is she? I struggled for the word. She's exactly who she always was. She admitted she sabotaged my wedding. She admitted she hid me from you because she didn't want you to see me. Marcus looked at me, a deep, simmering rage building behind his eyes. It was a cold anger, calculated, and terrifying. It was the same anger I felt when a competitor tried to undercut me. She hid you, he repeated slowly. She robbed me of 30 years. She let you grow up thinking you were second best. He walked back to his desk and pressed a button on the intercom. Edward? Yes, sir? A voice replied instantly. Get the legal team on the line. Woke them up if you have to. And call the security team in Las Vegas. What are you doing? I asked. Marcus looked at me. You said she wanted $90,000? Yes. Well, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. She's about to find out what happens when you try to extort a Blackwood. And she's going to find out that while she might have hidden you for 30 years, she can't hide from me now. He paused, his eyes softening as they met mine again. You said you wanted to know if you were truly a Blackwood, Aaron. Well, we have a family tradition. We don't get mad, we get even. Revenge? I asked, a shiver running down my spine, not of fear, but of anticipation. Justice, he corrected. Janice and Bob enjoyed the quiet life while they tormented you. I think it's time we made their lives. A little louder. Are you in? I looked at Caleb. He nodded, a grim smile on his face. I looked back at Marcus, my father. For the first time in 30 years, I didn't feel like the odd one out. I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. I'm in, I said. What's the plan? The library of the Blackwood estate transformed instantly from a place of emotional revelation to a war room. The change in atmosphere was palpable. A shift in barometric pressure that I had felt many times in boardrooms before a hostile takeover, but never in a living room. Marcus moved behind his massive oak desk, tapping a few keys on a sleek computer terminal. The warm amber lighting of the room seemed to cool, sharpening the angles of his face. He wasn't just my biological father in this moment. He was the chairman, the man who moved markets with a whisper. Edward, Marcus spoke into the air, addressing an invisible presence, likely a high-end speaker system connected to his chief of staff. Pull the financials on Robert and Janice Miller of Henderson, Nevada. Full forensic dive. Debts, assets, credit lines, and get me everything you can find on a Tyler Miller. Employment history, criminal record, civil suits. On it, sir, the disembodied voice replied. Eta 5 minutes. I sat in one of the leather wingback chairs, Caleb perched on the armrest beside me, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. I felt a strange cocktail of exhaustion and exhilaration running through my veins. For years, I had felt powerless against the silence of my parents. Now, I was sitting at the control panel of a nuclear weapon. You really think you can find something actionable that fast? I asked, watching Marcus work. He looked up, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, a smile that mirrored my own when I knew I had a competitor cornered. Aaron, wealth is just access to information at speed. Most people live their lives in a fog of privacy. People like us? We have radar. People like us, I repeated softly. The phrase still felt foreign, yet it fit more comfortably than daughter of Bob and Janice's ever had. While we wait, Marcus said, leaning back. Tell me about the business model for the boutique inns. The tech integration. I saw the deck, but I want to hear it from you. How did you get the overhead so low? It was a test. Or maybe a distraction. Either way, I took it. For the next 10 minutes, we spoke the universal language of efficiency. I explained how we automated the concierge services, how we used dynamic pricing algorithms, usually reserved for airlines, and how we turned local art scenes into marketing channels. Marcus nodded along, asking sharp, probing questions that forced me to defend my logic. He wasn't coddling me. He was vetting me. And I was passing. Sir, Edward's voice cut through our discussion. File is ready. Casting to the main screen. A panel on the wall slid back to reveal a large monitor. A stream of data appeared: bank statements, credit scores, property records. Marcus stood up and walked to the screen, gesturing for us to join him. Here is the story of the Miller family, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Robert and Janice Miller. Combined income. Fixed pension and Social Security. Modest. But look at the liabilities. He pointed to a red line on the graph that spiked dramatically 6 years ago. They took out a second mortgage on the Henderson house, Marcus noted. High interest. Predatory lender. 6 years ago? I frowned, doing the math. That was around the time of the wedding. Look at the date, Caleb said, pointing at the screen. June 14th. My breath caught in my throat. June 14th. My wedding day. Why would they take out a $50,000 loan on the day of my wedding? I asked. They weren't paying for the wedding. We paid for everything ourselves. Edward, Marcus commanded. Cross-reference that date with Tyler Miller's records. The screen flickered. A mugshot appeared. Tyler. Looking younger, messier, his eyes glassy and defiant. Tyler Miller. Arrested June 13, 2019. Las Vegas, NV. Charges: DUI causing property damage. Possession of a controlled substance. Bail set: $50,000. The room spun. They didn't skip the wedding because of a scheduling conflict, Caleb said, his voice thick with disgust. They skipped it because Tyler was in jail. They liquidated their equity, Marcus analyzed, his eyes scanning the court documents. They put their home on the line to bail him out so he wouldn't spend the weekend in a holding cell. And then, he pointed to another document, they paid for a high-end defense attorney. Looks like another $20,000. I stared at the mugshot of my brother. While I was putting on my veil, wondering why my parents didn't love me enough to show up, they were sitting in a bail bondsman's office in downtown Vegas, signing away their financial future to save Tyler from the consequences of his own actions. Something came up with Tyler, I whispered, the old text message echoing in my mind. It wasn't a lie. It was just omitted context. And look at the current status, Marcus said, tapping the mortgage section. They haven't paid the principal in years. They're making interest-only payments. They are 3 months behind. The bank has already sent a notice of default. The $90,000, I realized. Mom asked for $90,000 today. She said it was for a down payment for Tyler. It wasn't for a down payment, Marcus said grimly. It was to pay off the balloon payment on the second mortgage that is about to come due. If they don't pay it, they lose the house. They lied to get the money, I said, fury rising in my chest like bile. She tried to guilt me into saving the house she leveraged to keep Tyler out of prison on my wedding day. Correct, Marcus said. He turned to me, his expression serious. So, we have a choice. We can let the bank foreclose. They will be evicted in maybe 3 to 6 months. It's a standard tragedy. Or, I asked, looking at him. I knew there was an or. Or, Marcus said. Blackwood Holdings creates a distressed asset LLC. We purchase the debt from the bank. Banks love to offload bad debt for pennies on the dollar to reliable buyers. We buy the note. We buy the mortgage. And then? Then, Marcus said, a cold light entering his eyes. We become the bank. We become the landlord. We hold the deed to 402 Elm Street. I looked at the screen at the house where I had cried over bad grades, where I had been ignored, where I had been made to feel like an intruder. If we own the debt, I said slowly, we control the timeline. We can foreclose tomorrow, Marcus agreed. Or, we can call in the loan immediately. We can demand full repayment, and when they can't pay, we take the house, I finished. We take everything, Marcus corrected. We take the asset, We evict the tenants. And we do it legally, meticulously, and without mercy. He walked over to me. But this is your call, Aaron. They are the people who raised you. If you want to write them a check and walk away, I will support you. I will be disappointed, but I will support you. I looked at Caleb. He wasn't telling me what to do this time. He was just waiting. I thought about the forged email. I thought about the text message. I thought about my father's cowardice and my mother's manipulation. I thought about 30 years of being the backup plan. Buy the note, I said. My voice didn't shake. Buy it tonight. Marcus nodded, pulling out his phone. Edward. Execute the purchase of the Miller debt. Offer the bank 20% above the outstanding balance for an immediate transfer of rights. I want the paperwork done by sunrise. Done, the voice replied. Marcus turned back to me. The flight to Vegas is 40 minutes. If we leave in the morning, we can be at the county recorder's office when they open to finalize the deed transfer. And then we go to the house, I said. We go to your house, Marcus corrected. Technically, by noon tomorrow, you will be their landlord. I want to be the one to tell them, I said. I want to see her face when she realizes that the daughter she tried to scam now owns the roof over her head. You will, Marcus promised. But we need one more thing to make the circle complete. What's that? Tyler, Marcus said. If we're cleaning house, we take out the trash. Edward found something else in Tyler's file. Something recent. Something regarding the business he claims to run. Marcus tapped the screen again. Tyler Miller. Current investigation pending for fraudulent contractor practices. Unlicensed operation. He's been running scams on the elderly, Marcus said, his voice laced with disdain. Taking deposits for renovations he never does. It's small time. But it's nasty, and he's been using the Henderson address as his business HQ. Which means, Caleb said, catching on, that if the business is being run out of the home is liable, I finished. And if we own the home, we can invite the authorities in to inspect the premises. Marcus grinned. It was a shark's grin. We're not just evicting them, Aaron. We're dismantling the entire ecosystem of enabling that ruined your childhood. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. The exhaustion was gone. I felt sharp. I felt ready. Let's go to Vegas, I said. Marcus put a hand on my shoulder. Welcome to the family business, Aaron. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just Aaron the Striver. I was Aaron Blackwood, and I was coming home to foreclose. The ink on the transfer of lien document was still tacky when I slid it into my leather portfolio. It was 11:45 a.m. on a Tuesday, and legally speaking, I was no longer just the estranged daughter of Robert and Janice Miller. I was their creditor. We had landed in Las Vegas 2 hours earlier, moving with the synchronized precision of a military strike team. Marcus had arranged for a local counsel to meet us at the county recorder's office, bypassing the usual bureaucracy with the kind of lubrication that only a high six-figure retainer fee can provide. The bank, eager to offload a non-performing asset that was months in arrears, had practically tripped over themselves to sell the debt to Blackwood Holdings. Remember, Marcus said as we climbed into the back of a black Escalade, the desert sun glinting off his sunglasses. You are not walking in there as a daughter, seeking closure. You are walking in as a landlord inspecting an investment. Do not let them drag you into the mud of family. Keep it vertical. Keep it financial. I'm ready, I said, though my hands were cold. Caleb squeezed my fingers, his presence a silent anchor. The drive back to Henderson felt different this time. Yesterday, I had been a nervous wreck, seeking answers. Today, I was the grim reaper of consequences. When we turned onto Elm Street, the neighborhood looked the same, dusty, quiet, resigned to its mediocrity, but the house at 402 looked different to me. It wasn't a home anymore. It was an asset, and a distressed one at that. There was a new vehicle in the driveway, a lifted, cherry-red pickup truck that looked brand new, sitting next to Dad's rusted sedan. It took up 2 spaces, parking aggressively on the diagonal. Tyler, I murmured. The scam artist, Marcus noted, eyeing the truck. Bought on credit, no doubt. Or with the deposits from the elderly people he's defrauding. We parked. We didn't hide down the street this time. The driver pulled the Escalade directly behind Tyler's truck, blocking him in. A subtle, physical assertion of dominance. I got out, smoothing the lapels of my white power suit. I looked like I belonged in a boardroom in Manhattan, not a cracked driveway in Nevada. That was the point. We walked to the door. I didn't use my key. I rang the bell. Once. Long. And loud. Coming. Hold your horses. The door swung open, and for the first time in 6 years, I stood face to face with my brother. Tyler had filled out. He was no longer the lanky teenager I remembered. He was heavy-set, with a patchy beard, and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He was wearing a tank top that showed off a sunburn, and he held a half-eaten slice of pizza. He blinked at me, then at Marcus and Caleb standing behind me like bodyguards. Aaron? He chewed slowly, a smirk spreading across his face. Mom said you stopped by, said you got all fancy. He looked me up and down, his gaze stopping on my diamond earrings. I heard you're loaded now. Like, properly loaded. Is Mom home? I asked, my voice flat. Yeah. She's in the back. Hey, Ma! He shouted over his shoulder, crumbs spraying from his mouth. The ATM is back. Marcus stiffened beside me, but I didn't flinch. I walked past Tyler, forcing him to step back or be trampled. We marched into the living room. The scent of stale air and grease instantly familiar. Janice came rushing in from the patio, looking flustered. When she saw me, her face contorted into a mix of hope and annoyance. Aaron, she huffed, wiping her hands on her pants. I thought you said you were done with us. You made quite a scene yesterday. Did you come back to apologize? Or did you come back to write the check? I came back to talk about the wedding, I said. Janice rolled her eyes. Oh, for God's sake, drop it. We told you. Tyler had a thing. We're sorry. Move on. Tyler, I said, turning to my brother who had followed us in, leaning against the doorframe with arrogant slouch. Do you remember June 14th, 2019? Tyler frowned. I don't remember what I had for breakfast, sis. Why? June 14th, I repeated. My wedding day. Also the day you were arraigned for a DUI and possession. The room went dead silent. Tyler's smirk vanished. Janice froze. Dad, who was sitting in his recliner, put his head in his hands. How do you? Tyler stammered. Public records. Marcus spoke up. His voice was deep, resonant, and terrifyingly calm. He stepped forward, removing his sunglasses. DUI. Property damage. Possession of a controlled substance. Bail set at $50,000. Marcus turned his gaze to Janice. You didn't skip the wedding because of a schedule conflict. You skipped it because you had to liquidate the equity in this house to pay a bail bondsman so your son wouldn't spend the weekend in county lockup. Janice's face went pale, then red. Who are you? She demanded, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. Get out of my house. It's not your house, I said. Janice laughed, a high, hysterical sound. Excuse me? My name is on the deed. Bob's name is on the deed. Not anymore, I said. I opened the portfolio and pulled out the document. I laid it gently on the coffee table, right on top of a stack of old magazines. You took out a second mortgage to pay for Tyler's bail, I explained, my voice clinical. A high-interest loan. You made payments for a while, but then you stopped. You're 3 months behind. You owe the bank a balloon payment of $90,000. That's why you called me yesterday. Not for a down payment for Tyler, but to save yourselves from foreclosure. That's private financial information, Janice shrieked. You have no right. The bank sent a notice of default last week, I continued, ignoring her. Banks don't like bad debt, Mom. They like cash. So this morning, Blackwood Holdings approached your lender and offered to purchase the note in full, for cash, effective immediately. I tapped the paper on the table. I bought your debt, Mom. I own the mortgage. And since you are in default and have breached the terms of the agreement by failing to maintain the property value, I gestured to the water stain on the ceiling. I am exercising my right to accelerate the loan. Accelerate? Dad looked up, his face gray. What does that mean? It means the full amount is due, Marcus answered. Today, right now. We don't have $90,000, Tyler shouted, stepping forward aggressively. You can't just come in here and do this. This is family property. It was family property, I corrected him, turning to look my brother in the eye. Until you drank a fifth of vodka and drove your car through a storefront on my wedding day. You cost them this house, Tyler. Not me. You're bluffing, Janice spat. You wouldn't evict your own parents. You're trying to scare us. I am not trying to scare you, I said softly. I am evicting you. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises, Marcus stated, checking his watch. If you are not out by noon tomorrow, the sheriff's department will physically remove you. We have already arranged for a locksmith to change the tumblers. You can't do this, Janice screamed. lunging for the paper on the table. I'm your mother. You're my biological mother, I said, catching her wrist before she could touch the document. My grip was iron. But you made it very clear yesterday that I was never really your daughter. I was just the mistake you made with a rich man. I let go of her hand. She stumbled back, looking at Marcus with sudden, dawning horror. She recognized him. The eyes. The jawline. It finally clicked. Marcus? She whispered. Hello, Janice, Marcus said coldly. You look tired. You told him? She looked at me, betrayed. You told him about us? He figured it out, I said. He figured out that you stole 30 years of a relationship from us. He figured out that you lied. And now? Now we're figuring out how to clean up the mess. This is insane, Tyler muttered, looking between us. You're kicking us out? Where are we supposed to go? I hear the Red Roof Inn has vacancies, Caleb suggested helpfully. It's about the same quality as the Motel 6 you stayed in while Aaron was getting married at the Hotel del Coronado. Get out, Janice hissed. Get out of my house. Again, I said, picking up the document and sliding it back into my portfolio. It's my house, and I'm doing a walkthrough. I need to assess the damages before the renovation team gets here. Renovation team? Dad asked weakly. We're bulldozing it, I lied. I wasn't, but I wanted to hurt her. I'm going to turn the lot into a community garden. Something that actually grows, instead of something that rots. Tyler scoffed. You think you're so tough? You come in here with your rich daddy and your suit? You don't know who you're messing with, Aaron. I run this town. I have connections. Marcus let out a short, dark laugh. Connections? You mean the elderly widows you've been scamming with your fake contractor license? Tyler's face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Edward found the complaints, Marcus said, stepping closer to Tyler. He was taller than Tyler, broader, and radiated a kind of dangerous energy that Tyler's frat boy posturing couldn't match. Taking deposits for kitchen remodels and then disappearing, using this address as your registered HQ? Marcus leaned in. We own the house now, Tyler, which means we can invite the fraud unit in to inspect the records you keep in the garage. Unless, of course, you want to start packing right now. Tyler swallowed hard. He looked at Mom. He looked at Dad. He realized, perhaps for the first time in his life, that nobody was coming to bail him out. We're leaving, I said, turning to the door. You have until noon tomorrow. If you leave anything behind, it goes in the dumpster. I walked out into the bright Nevada sun, my heart pounding a rhythm of pure, unadulterated victory. I didn't look back at the window. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what they looked like, defeated. But as we reached the car, Marcus stopped. He looked at the red truck blocking us in. One more thing, he said. Edward? Yes. Sir? The voice came from his pocket. Call the repo company for that truck. I believe he's missed 3 payments on that too. Let's make sure he walks to the motel. I looked at my father, my real father, and smiled. You're ruthless, I said. I'm protective, he countered, opening the car door for me. There's a difference. We drove away, leaving the Miller family to pack up the wreckage of the life they had built on lies. But the story wasn't over, because Tyler Miller wasn't just a scammer. He was desperate, and desperate men do dangerous things. The suite at the Aria was a study in excess 2,000 square feet of marble, velvet, and floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the neon canyon of the Las Vegas Strip. It was the kind of room designed to make you feel like a god looking down on mortals. But as I sat on the plush sofa, watching the Bellagio fountains dance below, I didn't feel like a god. I felt like a survivor who had just crawled out of a shipwreck and onto dry land. Marcus handed me a glass of sparkling water with a twist of lime. He had switched from corporate raider mode to dad mode with disarming speed. You did well today, he said, taking the armchair opposite me. Caleb was on the balcony, taking a call from our CFO back in Seattle, giving us a moment of privacy. Most people crumble when they have to confront their abusers. You didn't flinch. I flinched on the inside, I admitted, taking a sip. The bubbles bit at my tongue. It's strange. I spent my whole life wanting their approval. Today, I realized I don't even like them. That's the secret to freedom, Marcus said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. It's not when they love you. It's when you stop caring if they do. The moment was peaceful, a rare quiet in the storm of the last 48 hours. But peace, I was learning, was a commodity my family, my former family, couldn't afford. The silence was shattered by the sharp chime of the iPad sitting on the coffee table. It was connected to the Blackwood security network. Edward's voice came through the speaker. Tight. And urgent. Mr. Blackwood, you need to see the feed from the Henderson property. Now. Marcus leaned forward and tapped the screen. The high-definition feed from the camera his team had discreetly installed on the telephone pole across from 402 Elm Street flickered to life. It was night in Henderson, the streetlights casting long, orange shadows. But the driveway was brightly lit by the headlights of Tyler's truck. He hadn't left. What is he doing? I whispered, leaning in. On the screen, Tyler was staggering back and forth from the truck to the garage. He was carrying red plastic jerry cans. Gasoline, Marcus said, his voice dropping to absolute zero. He's going to burn it down, Caleb said, rushing in from the balcony as he heard the commotion. He's going to torch the house so you can't have it. He's going to kill himself, I said, watching Tyler stumble. He was clearly intoxicated. He splashed liquid onto the dry, dead lawn. Then he kicked the front door open and disappeared inside with a can. Edward, Marcus barked. Get the police. Fire department. Now. Already dispatched, sir. ETA 6 minutes. We're going, I said, grabbing my purse. Aaron, no, Marcus started. It's dangerous. It's my house, I said, the words coming out with a ferocity that surprised even me. And I want to see him face the consequences. I'm tired of hearing about Tyler's situations. I want to see Tyler's arrest. Marcus looked at me, saw the resolve in my jaw, his jaw, and nodded. Let's go. The driver broke every traffic law between the Strip and Henderson. We made the 30-minute drive in 17 minutes, sirens wailing from the police escort Marcus had somehow arranged. As we turned onto Elm Street, the smell hit us before we saw the flames. It was the acrid, chemical stench of accelerant. The house wasn't fully engulfed yet, but smoke was billowing from the living room window. The front lawn, soaked in gas, had a few small lickings of flame where Tyler had clumsily tried to ignite it. Police cruisers were already screeching to a halt, their lights painting the neighborhood in chaotic strobes of red and blue. Neighbors were standing on their lawns in bathrobes, phones out, filming the spectacle. We jumped out of the car just as 2 officers kicked in the front door. Tyler! I screamed, not out of concern but out of sheer disbelief. He stumbled out of the garage, coughing, a lighter in his hand. His face was soot-stained, his eyes wild and bloodshot. He looked like a cornered rat. Stay back! He screamed, waving the lighter at the officers. I'll do it. I swear to God. I'll light the whole block up. Drop the lighter, an officer shouted, weapon drawn. It's my house, Tyler yelled, his voice cracking. If I can't live here, nobody lives here. You hear me, Aaron? Nobody. He spotted me standing behind the police line, flanked by Marcus and Caleb. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with a lifetime of unearned entitlement curdling into hate. You think you're better than me? He slurred. You think because you got some rich daddy you can just come in here and take what's mine? It was never yours, Tyler. I shouted back, stepping forward despite Caleb's hand on my arm. You didn't pay for it. You didn't work for it. You leached off them until they were dry, and now you're trying to burn the husk. Shut up! Tyler lunged toward the gas-soaked lawn, flicking the lighter. The flame caught. Whoosh! A line of fire raced across the dead grass, snake-like and fast, heading straight for the open garage where old paint cans and oily rags were stored. Move! Marcus shoved me back behind the Escalade. The officers tackled Tyler a split second before the fire reached the structure. They hit him hard, driving him into the pavement. The lighter skittered away. One officer dragged Tyler back while another grabbed a fire extinguisher from his cruiser and blasted the trail of flames on the lawn. It was chaotic, loud, and pathetic. I watched as they cuffed him. Tyler was sobbing now, the adrenaline fading, replaced by the crushing reality of what he had just done. Attempted arson, reckless endangerment, assault on a police officer. The front door of the house opened, and Mom and Dad stumbled out, coughing from the smoke. They looked shell-shocked. Janice was clutching her purse. Dad was holding a framed photo of ironically Tyler playing baseball. They stood on the driveway, watching the police drag their golden child toward the back of a squad car. Tyler looked up and saw them. Mom! Mom! Tell them it's my house. Tell them to let me go. Janice took a step forward, her instinct to enable him kicking in one last time. "Officer, please. He's just upset. He didn't mean it. He's a good boy, he just—" "Ma'am, step back," the officer said sternly. "Your son just tried to burn down a residential property. He's under arrest." Janice turned to me. Her face was a mask of desperation. "Aaron. Please. Drop the charges. He's your brother. He's sick. He needs help. Not jail." I looked at her. I looked at the smoke staining the stucco of the house. I looked at Marcus, who stood silently beside me, letting me handle this. "He's not my brother," I said, my voice cutting through the noise of the sirens. "He's a criminal who just tried to destroy my property." "Aaron," Dad pleaded, "have a heart." "I do have a heart," I said, feeling Caleb's hand squeeze mine. "That's why I'm letting the professionals handle him. Maybe in prison, he'll finally learn that actions have consequences. God knows you two never taught him that." "We'll lose everything," Janice sobbed. "If he goes to jail, the legal fees." "You already lost everything," I reminded her. "You have until noon tomorrow to vacate." "And Janice?" She looked up, her eyes streaming with tears. "Don't steal the copper wiring on your way out. We'll be checking." I turned my back on them. I walked toward the car, the flashing lights of the police cruisers reflecting in the windows. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. But for the first time in 30 years, I felt light. The burden of their dysfunction, which I had carried on my back like a stone, was finally gone. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked as he opened the car door. "No," I said honestly. "But I will be." We drove away, leaving the chaos of Elm Street behind. Tyler was in handcuffs. The house was saved, though scarred. And the Miller family was finally, irrevocably broken. But as we headed back toward the lights of the Strip, Marcus's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID, and his expression shifted from protective father to calculating CEO. "It's the press," he said. "Apparently, billionaire's daughter evicts parents is a headline that travels fast. The story is leaking." "Let it leak," I said, leaning my head back against the seat. "I'm done hiding." "But Marcus?" "Yes? I want to control the narrative. If the world is going to talk about me, they're going to hear the truth. All of it." "Then we have one more stop to make," Marcus said. "I have a friend at the Times. An exclusive interview. Tomorrow morning." "Perfect," I said. The fire was out, but I was just getting started. The headline of the New York Times Sunday business section read, "The $850 million secret. How tech CEO Erin Blackwood reclaimed her legacy." It was a good photo. I was standing on the balcony of the Blackwood estate in Coronado, looking out at the ocean, with Marcus standing just behind my left shoulder. We looked like a united front. We looked untouchable. The article itself was a masterclass in narrative control. Marcus's PR team, working in tandem with my own, had spun the story not as a sordid family drama, but as a tale of resilience. We didn't hide the ugly details, the forgery, the arrest, the eviction. We laid them out like forensic evidence. We controlled the context so the tabloids couldn't invent it. The public reaction was swift and overwhelming. The internet, usually a cesspool of division, rallied around the story. Number Erin Blackwood became a trending topic. People shared their own stories of toxic families and parental estrangement. For the first time in my life, my messy, painful history wasn't a source of shame. It was a badge of honor that inspired strangers. 3 weeks after the fire, I returned to Henderson one last time. The smell of smoke still lingered faintly in the air at 402 Elm Street, but the house was empty. The Millers had vacated exactly 1 hour before the sheriff arrived, fleeing to a weekly rate motel on the outskirts of North Las Vegas. They left behind a lifetime of debris, broken furniture, piles of old newspapers, and the heavy, suffocating atmosphere of a home where love was conditional. I walked through the empty rooms with the contractor Marcus had hired. "Structure is sound," the contractor said, tapping a clipboard. "We can remodel the kitchen, redo the floors, maybe knock down this wall, to open up the living space, flip it, for a nice profit." I stood in the kitchen. I looked at the spot where I had sat doing homework while Mom praised Tyler for eating a sandwich. I looked at the counter where she had chopped carrots and lied to my face about my wedding. "No," I said. The contractor blinked. "No? I don't want to flip it," I said. "I don't want another family to live inside these walls. There's too much bad history here. It's in the drywall." I walked to the window and looked out at the scorched patch of lawn where Tyler had tried to burn it all down. "Bulldoze it," I ordered. The contractor raised his eyebrows. Ma'am, the land value is okay, but the house is worth. I don't care about the asset value, I interrupted. Tear it down. Pull up the foundation. I want the lot scraped clean. I turned to him, remembering the lie I had told Tyler in the heat of the moment, a lie that was about to become the truth. I'm donating the land to the city, I said, on the condition that it be used for a community garden. I want flowers to grow here. I want vegetables. I want neighbors to come here and share food, not hoard it. I want something to actually grow in this soil. The contractor smiled, a genuine, warm expression. Yes, Miss Blackwood. We can do that. Leaving Henderson felt like shedding a skin. As we drove away, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a notification from Forbes or a text from Marcus. It was from Dad. I stared at the name. I hadn't blocked him yet. Some part of me, the wounded child, had kept the channel open, perhaps waiting for an apology that would never come. Aaron, please, the motel is awful. Mom is sick. We have nowhere to go. We're family. Just a few thousand, please. There was no, I'm sorry. No, we love you. No, we were wrong. Just the same grasping hand, reaching out to take from the daughter they had thrown away. I looked at the text. 6 years ago, a text from him had broken me. Sorry, kiddo. Something came up. Today, a text from him was nothing more than digital noise. I didn't reply. I didn't feel a pang of guilt. I simply tapped the info icon, scrolled down to the bottom, and hit block caller. Then I did the same for Mom. I put the phone in my purse and looked at Caleb. It's done. Good, he said, kissing my hand. Now, we have an appointment to keep. The final chapter of my story didn't happen in a boardroom or a courtroom. It happened on a beach in San Diego, just a mile down the coast from the Hotel del Coronado. We decided to do a renewal of vows. Not a massive production, not a media event, just us. The setting sun painted the sky in violent shades of violet and gold. The ocean rhythm was steady and ancient. There were only 20 chairs set up in the sand. My friends from Seattle were there, my team from the company. And in the front row, sitting in the seat of honor that had been empty 6 years ago, was Marcus Blackwood. He looked dashing in a linen suit, his eyes shining with pride. He wasn't just a donor or a boss. Over the last few months, we had spent hours talking not about business, but about books, about history, about the quirks of our shared DNA. We were building a relationship brick by brick, without the mortar of obligation. The music started. A string quartet played a soft, acoustic version of the song that had played at my first wedding, the one where I had walked alone. This time, I didn't walk alone. Marcus stood up and offered me his arm. Ready? He asked, softly. I looked up at him, my father. Ready. We walked down the aisle together. The sand was cool beneath my bare feet. I saw Caleb waiting for me under the arch, his eyes wet with tears, looking at me with the same fierce love he had shown when I was a nobody, with a dream and a laptop. When we reached the altar, Marcus kissed my cheek. I gave you away, he whispered, loud enough for Caleb to hear. But I'm not going anywhere. I know, I whispered back. The ceremony was short, sweet, and profoundly healing. We spoke our vows again, but this time, the words carried the weight of the storms we had weathered. We promised to be each other's shelter. We promised to be each other's truth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in twilight, we turned to face our guests. I looked at the faces of the people who actually loved me, the family I had chosen, and the family that had found me. I thought about the text message that started it all. Dad texted. It's funny how a single moment of rejection can become the catalyst for your greatest victory. If they had come to my wedding, if they had played the part of loving parents just one more time, I might never have left. I might have stayed in the box they built for me, small and suffocating. I might never have built my company. I might never have found Marcus. Their absence was the greatest gift they ever gave me. Later that night, as the party wound down and the stars came out over the Pacific, Marcus found me by the fire pit. I have one last wedding present, he said, handing me a small envelope. I opened it. It was a single key. What is this? The key to the executive suite at the Hotel del Coronado, he smiled. I own the hotel, Aaron. I thought you might want to spend your wedding night in the place where you decided to stop chasing people who didn't want to be caught. I squeezed the key in my hand, the metal biting into my palm. It was a full circle. Thank you, I said. And Aaron? He added, looking at the fire. I saw the demolition order for the Henderson lot, the community garden. You disapprove? On the contrary, he said. putting an arm around my shoulder. I think it's the best investment you've ever made. I leaned into him, watching the sparks fly up into the night sky, disappearing among the stars. I was 31 years old. I was worth $850 million. I had a husband who adored me, a father who respected me, and a future that was entirely my own. My mom skipped my wedding. My dad texted an excuse. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me.